I want to use this video to give you some feedback on the Afrikaner Foundation and the work that we have been doing since the preliminary launch back on the 4th of July. So I should say from the get-go that the event that we had on the 4th of July was not the official launch of the Afrikaner Foundation, but what you might call a soft launch. And what we mean by that is that it was an event for us to launch the brand and the name and the website so that we can start working leading up to or building up towards the official launch of the Afrikaner Foundation, which will happen later this year. We are currently working on dates and venues for the big event where we will launch this new initiative. Now, immediately after the soft launch on the 4th of July, we departed to the USA for our first official activity or event of the Afrikaner Foundation. And you might have been following some of what we were doing in America during this trip. And this was a very packed trip. I'm not going to try to talk to you about everything that happened, but there were some major milestones during this trip. Now, I might say at first that it was incidentally 2.5 weeks during which a lot of things happened in American politics. It was just after the presidential debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. So during these 2 weeks, there was a lot of pressure on Joe Biden to step down as candidate. It was during our visit in the US when the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump took place. Also during our trip when Joe Biden announced that he had stepped back from the race, and a whole bunch of other things that happened during this trip. So it was a very busy time to be in America, which in a sense was good because there was a lot of talk about political issues. Now, I'm only going to talk about the milestones or the big events during this trip. And the one obviously was the NatCon conference, which was initially the main reason why we went. NatCon, of course, stands for National Conservatism, and this conference was called NatCon 4 because it was the fourth big NatCon conference. It was hosted in Washington, D.C., and it is hosted by the Edmund Burke Foundation and several other conservative publications and institutions, led largely by Yoram Hazony, the author of Conservatism, A Rediscovery, and The Virtue of Nationalism. Now, we were very excited and grateful to be invited, not just to attend this conference, but to actually speak at this conference. I went to this conference together with my friend and colleague Ernst van Zyl from AfriForum, or Conscious Caracal as he's largely known on social media. And it was an incredible experience to attend this conference, just to see the extent to which people are truly interested, firstly, in what is happening in South Africa, but not just what is happening in South Africa and the failures of South Africa, of the South African government and so forth, but primarily what people in South Africa and the Afrikaners in particular are doing in response to these problems. And that is why they wanted us to speak at this conference, to talk about the failure of South Africa, but more particularly the parallel structures, as they called it, that we are developing in South Africa. And so you might have seen the speech. The speech is available on the National Conservatism YouTube channel. It has been shared on social media, on our social media platforms. And so the focus of my speech was Ons Sal Self, the Afrikaner philosophy for fixing your own problems. And I spoke about this Ons Sal Self idea, or we will do it ourselves, to translate to English. And I spoke about the Help Mekaar beweging, or the Help Each Other movement of the 1920s and 30s that the Afrikaners started after the Great War, the Anglo-Boer War, the First World War, the rebellion, and then the Depression. And how we have decided during these very difficult times that the only way through is to focus on building community institutions. And I explained during my speech that we as the Afrikaners have lost much of this in the second half of the 20th century, when we went from being community and institution builders to being state builders, to building this massive South African state. And the state wasn't sustainable for a variety of reasons, and we know that history very well, and it wasn't destroyed, it was taken over. And when it was taken over, the institutions that we have built and that we have attached to the government were also taken away, and many of them were smashed before our eyes, and many of them were turned into weapons used against us. And so that led to the advent of the so-called New South Africa, the miracle in South Africa, and the wonderful new political dispensation, which of course we know now turned out not to be as great as it was expected to be. And under these circumstances, despite the fact that there are currently more than 140 race laws in South Africa discriminating against people on the basis of the color of their skin, discriminating against minorities on the basis of the color of their skin, we, the Afrikaner people, have rediscovered this ancient wisdom of building your own institutions and of fixing your own problems. And so that was the focus of my speech. And one issue I mentioned during this speech was what I described as the vote mind virus. I mentioned that wokeness is a serious threat, but it has become a bigger threat to the future of liberalism than to conservatism, because it is so unlikable and unrelatable. But that there's another mind virus other than the woke mind virus that we should be concerned about, and that is the vote mind virus. And the vote mind virus teaches us that every election is the most important election we have ever had, that the most important thing you can do politically is to vote in an election, and that everything will stand or fall depending on the outcome of the next election. Now, obviously, voting and elections are important, and the Afrikaner community overwhelmingly participate in elections. The point of expressing concern about the vote mind virus is not to say that people shouldn't vote, but rather that people should not think of voting and the government as the main source of their problems or of their prosperity. That voting is important, but what you do before and after election day is even more important. And this message was exceptionally well received, and we're very happy about that. We're very happy about the conversations we had, the networking opportunities we had, and all the events and opportunities that will follow from this conference, which you will hear about in the months and year to follow. During our visit to Washington, we also met with more than 40 people. We actually counted. And we had several interviews, podcast interviews, and so forth. The biggest one was Human Events, the show hosted by Jack Posobiec, where he interviewed me about what's happening in South Africa and how we are responding to this. From Washington, we went to New York, where we had several meetings, the most important of which was the big event hosted by the New York Young Republicans Club on the 23rd of July. And this was an exceptionally well-attended event. As a matter of fact, they had to move venues. They had to move to a bigger venue because there was so much interest in this event. And it was really remarkable to see how many people were there because they were truly interested in what is happening in South Africa, and again, what the Afrikaners are doing under these circumstances. My fellow speakers at this event were Jack Posobiec again and Rahim Kassam, both of which spoke very well. And the speech that I gave at this event is available on YouTube, on social media, but the entire event is also published on the New York Young Republicans Club's YouTube channel. So you can watch all three of the speeches and the panel discussion and the Q&A that took place afterwards on the YouTube channel of the New York Young Republicans. We're very grateful for the interest that we have seen in America, and it's very remarkable to see how the tide is changing already. Where several years ago it was nearly impossible to talk about the problems surfacing in South Africa because people truly wanted to believe that it's a miracle story. And then around 2018 and around COVID and so forth, people started realizing that there are some serious problems in South Africa, which then shifted to an interest in what people are doing under these circumstances. And this is truly something that we welcome and that we will continue to participate in. Now, this event, this trip to the US was a very successful trip, and we are very grateful for that. But I want to share one or two more ideas about the Afrikaner Foundation leading up to this big launch event that we are going to have later this year. We are spending the time currently to get our operations and our communications up and running. Now, our operations is largely built around the website, afrikaner.org, where through which people can join the organization, become members, and through which people can make donations for the work that we are doing. The work that we are doing is, of course, not just the work of the Afrikaner Foundation. It's the work that the various institutions of the Solidarity Movement is doing through the Solidarity Helping Hand, through the FRK, the Federation of Afrikaans Cultural Organizations, through AfriForum, through Solidarity, through Academia, and also the Orania Development Company, the work that we are doing to help Orania develop from a town into a city. And we're very grateful for the support we have received to date, and I want to encourage you, the viewer, to support these initiatives by going to afrikaner.org/support. Please also provide us with feedback on the website if you have any suggestions and so forth. You can send us an email to info@afrikaner.org. As far as communications are concerned, we have various communication channels that I would encourage you to subscribe to, one of which obviously is the YouTube channel on which you are watching this video currently, the YouTube channel of the Afrikaner Foundation. We are active on all the major social media platforms, so you can follow us or subscribe to us over there. But other than that, I would encourage you especially to make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channels, because videos would be a major part of our communication strategy. And also to subscribe to our podcast, the Pioneer Podcast, which is available on all the major podcasting platforms. The podcast has been doing well and it's growing consistently. So we are very happy about that. And I would encourage you again to go and subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss out on important information in this regard. Other than that, we are looking into starting a Substack where we will publish regular articles about South Africa, about what the Afrikaners are doing and so forth, and we will share more information about this in the weeks to follow. In the short term, having returned now from the US, our focus would be on reaching out to the embassies in South Africa, reaching out to international organizations, because the work of the Afrikaner Foundation is predominantly focused on garnering international support for the work of these institutions that I've mentioned. But I would encourage you to sign up as a member, to reach out to us if you are willing to help in any way, especially if you don't live in South Africa, if you live in America, Europe, or any other country, and you are willing to play a particular role there where you live. We would gladly welcome that, and we would gladly stay in touch with you about future activities and ways in which you can support. So with that, please go and subscribe to these channels, and we will certainly stay in touch.